It's been said that lean thinking is about the economies of time as opposed to traditional process thinking, which is focused on economies of scale, and which is where you get into the idea of creating big batches of things for the convenience of the process, as opposed to lean thinking, which is focused on reducing the amount of time that it takes to process a product or process an application or deliver service through a process. In this video, we'd like to look at lead time. And lead time, I like to think of it in this way. Let's just imagine this pipe is a process. And in fact, the metaphor of a pipe I like to use because it has the idea of flowing and trying to have velocity through the pipe, through the process. Or you could have a pipeline that gets backed up and does not flow, which is the opposite of lean. Lead time is defined as a point where the customer or client places an order for a product, submits an application, for example, and we start the clock at that point. And then when the product or order or application we submitted, we as the customer or the client fully and accurately receive that product or service, we press the stopwatch again. And that total amount of time is the lead time. A couple of things to note. One is organizations would need to be careful to define a practical standard definition of when we start the clock so that we don't have people exercising a great deal of discretion that introduces a lot of variability into the measurements. That's not due to the process, but it's due to an inconsistency in the measurement process. Second point is we need to make sure that we double check the lead time definition with how our clients or customers perceive it. So for example, the organization might say, well, at this point, the product or service is rendered. And so, hooray, we turn off the stopwatch. However, the client might have to go through some extra steps on their own, and in their minds, they're still waiting for the process to complete. So we just need to double check from their perspective when they think the service is fully completed. And I use the word fully and accurately completed. If the client has got to go back to your organization to get something redressed, or have to return the product because it has defects or problems in it, for them, the clock is still running. So we need to make sure that we capture that time so that we don't falsely have a short lead time and have this hidden extra time, which is consuming organizational resources as well as testing the patience of our customers or clients. So lead time, if you want to look at it from a technical point of view, is consisting of 4 parts. Part 1 is what we call cycle time. And cycle time is the value adding time in a process. So in this hypothetical, we've got 3 process steps, and each of them would have, therefore, a cycle time 1, cycle time 2, cycle time 3, associated with value adding activity. And if that's all that it was, then you have tremendous flow. All you got to do now is make sure you have these 3 cycle times optimized, if you will. But very often there's a second source of time, which is waiting time. And I've deliberately drawn this picture with this gap here between, let's just say this is where the clock starts. And before we even get to the first value-adding step, we have wait time 1. It has to wait its turn in line. And let's just say that there's waiting time 2 here and waiting time 3. And for ease of this example, let's just say as soon as step 3 ends, it gets delivered to the customer, and then we would turn off the clock. So that's wait time. However, there's also non-value added time, NVA. An example of that is time spent fixing problems, fixing defects, fixing deficiencies in the product, going back and reworking the case file because it wasn't done properly in a previous step, etc. So this non-value added time could show up either embedded in the work of these 3 steps because it needs to be sent back and redone, which is actually one reason why you might have waiting times, is that this step is occupied sort of in this non-value added activity. The other way it could happen is it could be an entirely separate department or step in the process that has a cycle time associated with it that, let's just say a problem is detected in this final step. It gets sent to this process step here, 4. They work on it, they fix it, and then after that it goes back into queue here to go through step 3 again, say. All of this is non-value added work, but we need to capture that time because that particular case file, for example, is still in the pipeline because of that. And finally, there's time that we call business value added, or BVA, and that's time that perhaps is a requirement of a regulation where some documentation has to be prepared, some tests have to be done, which the client is not requesting and the business wouldn't do normally, but we have to do it for, say, legal or regulatory reasons. That time is also in here and needs to be captured, and is another reason why you might have a longer lead time than if it was just the value-adding cycle times. Another reason why you might have waiting times is that these process steps aren't in balance. But what I mean by that is, let's just say that process step 1 has a much shorter cycle time, can process the product or the applications much faster than the rest of the process, so you start having build up here because step 2 is not synchronized with step 1. Another reason why is that one of these steps may not be available. So let's just say this is a machine here at step 2. It is broken or it's been taken offline for maintenance. You might have then a buildup of weight here, a lineup. Or in another case, it might be person is sick and we haven't cross-trained our staff to be able to cover for each other. And so that step now is down. And so the applications or submissions are getting backed up here at step 2. All of these are reasons why when an order or product is made into a process, it gets jammed up into this pipeline of a process and inflates the lead time. And so that's a quick summary of the definition of lead time.